Hey everyone. Today I wanted to talk about Diablo 4's item progression and compare it to Diablo 2 to see where improvements can be made or where Diablo 4 can learn some lessons from Diablo 2. So let's first talk about Diablo 2 for some background. Now, disclaimer, I love Diablo 2. It is still to this day my favorite video game. I think there's things that can be improved about it, but overall to me, Diablo 2 is the gold standard. So, with that said, let's talk about Diablo 2's item progression. For this, we're going to exclude charms and, Hellfire Torch and all that kind of stuff. Just strictly the gear that your character wears. So I made this beautiful diagram here to demonstrate kind of what your character's power feels like over time. And you'll see some of those jumps there are labeled. So in Diablo 2, the power you get from items is very stepwise. In the early game, you might find a decent belt, or you make a cheap rune word like steel, or you shop a decent scepter or a good staff to use. And those are those little jumps there at the beginning. But then you find an am rune to make the spirit rune word, and all of a sudden you get this big spike. You make some other rune words with runes that you find at the end of normal difficulty, and then you're off to the races. Now, at this point, you can probably finish Hell difficulty with the gear that you have at that point, which only takes maybe a couple hours. And then you're farming. So, you're farming along, you're killing Mephisto or whatever, and all of a sudden, you find a Skin of the Viper Magi, or a Mage Fist, or something of that same caliber. It's not a super rare item, but it's rare enough that when you find it, you're excited. You're like, whoa, this is awesome. And you immediately put it on, and you can feel its power increase your character's power. So you continue farming along, and it's a little bit smoother and faster because that item gave you more power and makes it feel better, and you find a Shaco, or something of that caliber. And it's pretty rare. And when you find it, your heart skips a beat, and you immediately put it on, and you can feel its power. So you continue farming along, you're killing Diablo or Baal or what have you, and it's a little bit smoother and faster because you found that Shaco, and then you find a Vex rune, or a Mara's, or a Stone of Jordan, or something of that caliber, and it's really rare. And when you find it, you jump out of your chair. You're you're shocked. You immediately equip it or put it to use in the case of a rune, and you can feel its power increase your character's power. So by this point, you're pretty well geared. And the only things left to improve are some high rune words or some super duper rare unique. So you continue farming along, and it's fast and it's easy, and you're crushing it. And eventually you find an Arachnid's Mesh, or a Death's Fathom, or high runes like a Bear rune or a Jaw rune or something of that caliber. And you shout for joy. You're so excited, you wake up your whole house, you shed a tear, you immediately put it to use, and you immediately feel this big jump in power. Now in Diablo 2, you continue farming along, you find another Skin of the Viper Magi, so you trade it for a pull rune or something. Farming along and you find another Shaco. You trade it for a Vex or some other item that you can use. Farming along, you find a better roll of a powerful unique, or you find an Ohm rune to make a support item. You continue finding stuff, and it's exciting. But your power is relatively at that same level. So, the takeaways from this are there's a lot of middle ground rarity between the uber rare items and your starter gear. As you can see, you have all your starter gear at the very beginning, and then you find these pieces along the way that increase your power incrementally until way late in the game when you're finding those super rare things. There are a lot of items, both runewords and uniques, that can be upgrades throughout your progression, and each upgrade feels significant. The upgrades can be immediately put to use. You can kill the boss, it drops it. You identify it in your inventory right there. You equip it. You save and exit, relaunch, keep attacking. And free trade makes finding duplicates or even downgrades for what you already have feel a lot better because you can trade it for items that will actually increase your power, or you can trade it for runes or some kind of currency. So, with that in mind, let's talk about Diablo 4's current item progression. And this is just as I see it, have seen it. So another beautiful diagram here. So Diablo 4. So you're running around at the beginning of the game, level 1 to 15 or whatever, and you're killing stuff, you're leveling up, and you're equipping everything that you find. That's the little squiggly, ugly thing that I drew there, where it says getting yellows. This stage moves pretty quickly, but it's really engaging, at least in my opinion. You're opening your inventory a lot, you're checking items, you're equipping stuff right away. It's kind of fun to, you find another yellow, and is it better than the one I already have? And you're going fast. So now, at this point, you found all yellow stuff. It's usable. It's not the best, but it's passable. And you apply all your legendary powers from your codex to it. And all of a sudden, you get this massive leap in power. It's like your character is a completely different character, and it's awesome. It feels so good. You go from your really crappy, pulverize in one little spot to now you have a shockwave and you get bonus damage from this and yada yada. It's awesome. You're godly. You're melting enemies that you used to struggle against. And then you spend the next couple hours leveling and getting to World Tier 3, getting maybe some better, a better ring or something like that. Nothing too crazy. You get to World Tier 3, and you have to replace everything. You replace everything with sacred items, and you get a pretty big jump there. And you reapply your codex powers because you don't want to waste the aspects that you found. And you continue along. You level up. You maybe find a little piece here and there that's slightly better than what you had, but it doesn't really matter because all of a sudden you've unlocked World Tier 4, and now you repeat that same process. You got to find all ancestral items to replace what you already have, but this gives you a big jump in power. And at this point, you put on maybe higher rolled legendary aspects that you found along the way that you had saved. And now at this stage, you've got a pretty workable character with some room to grow. And so you keep farming and you start this process of min-maxing. You might find pants with a slightly higher roll on one of the damage reduction stats that you like. Or, you find a ring that has, instead of 4.9% lucky hit, it has 5.1% lucky hit chance. And then you go and upgrade that. So each individual upgrade at this stage doesn't really feel like much. But over time, you kind of look back and you realize that you've become quite a bit stronger. And so that can be seen here at this slight kind of slope here where I have the min-maxing item stats and legendary rolls over time, where no individual moment on that line does it feel like you've made a big jump. But over time, you do kind of grow. Now, in this stage, each item you find, you have to go into town. You take it to the occultist. Let's say you found a 3 out of 4, an item with 3 out of 4 stats that you want. You take it to the occultist. You re-roll that last one a couple times until you can't afford to re-roll it anymore. Then you go put a legendary power on it. Then you go to the blacksmith. You upgrade it to 5. Then you take it to the jeweler. You put a socket in it and you put the right gem in it or what have you, and then you equip it, and then you go back out there and you farm. You repeat this process for approximately 1,000 years, and then maybe you'll find one of those uber unique items, and that's going to be a huge power jump. So, the takeaways from this: the early game is very engaging. You're constantly getting upgrades, you're equipping stuff a lot, you're changing your gear, and you feel like you're growing fast. You feel like the changes you're making, the items that you're equipping, actually have meaning. You get a massive, massive power spike when you apply your legendary powers, and it feels awesome. You're obligated to replace all your gear at least twice, once when you get to each new world tier. Upgrades require a lot of tinkering before they can actually be used. You can't just find an item and be like, this is awesome, and right-click it to equip it and keep going. You have to go to town, do a bunch of stuff with a bunch of vendors, and then you can equip it and move on. Once all your gear is ancestral, no individual item upgrade really feels that significant. Maybe, you get one that has... Maybe you've been using ones that don't have the right stats, and then you find ones that have the right stats, and that can be a big jump. But overall, you might find a little bit higher roll, or this one has, a 1% increase on this, or a 2% increase on that. So, what can Diablo 4 learn from Diablo 2? I think that there's a lot of room in between those uber uniques and that stage of the game where you're min-maxing your legendary items. I think that Diablo 4 can create more tiers of rarity for uniques and make a lot more uniques to fill in that gap. If you remember in the Diablo 2 slide, here I can go back real quick. It wasn't just like, oh, I found an Amarin and now I'm waiting to find Arachnid's Mesh, or I'm waiting to find, Burr runes. There's a lot of stuff in between here that you'll end up replacing. You'll replace your Skin of the Viper Magi. You'll replace your, your Lore Helm or your Ancient's Pledge Shield, or you'll replace those things as you go, but you're constantly finding things that are going to increase your power. So I think that making more tiers of things that kind of increase your power incrementally can be a great benefit to smooth out that process and make it feel like when you're finding things, they're beneficial. I think that Diablo 4 can make replacing your gear with sacred and ancestral items feel better. I think that maybe the ranges can roll bigger or higher on sacred and ancestral. But I feel like the difference between normal, sacred, and ancestral should be, I don't know, maybe bigger, or make it feel better in that, one, I think that the items should feel stronger, and two, make it feel not as bad just throwing away all the gear that you've carried around with you for several hours. I also think that a big issue, at least from my perspective, in Diablo 4 is the amount of time it takes between finding an item and equipping it. I think if they can find ways to reduce that time, it would be a great benefit. Because one of my favorite things to do in Diablo 2 is you're running along, you find an item, you equip it, and you just keep going. You don't go to town and roll this and apply that and change this and yada yada. It's just you equip it, you keep going, you push, push, push. So I think if they can create ways, I don't know how to do that exactly, but if they can figure out ways to reduce that amount of time that it takes between finding a cool item and putting it to use, I think that could be a great benefit. Fourth thing, create ways that make finding duplicates of uniques, or finding another high roll legendary aspect, more exciting. In this game, in Diablo 4, they can't be traded, which makes finding, like for example, druids have a really hard time in general finding the unique Tempest Roar. A lot of people want it because it unlocks some really cool builds, and it takes a long time to find, and then you find it and you're like, yes, now I can play my Tornado Werewolf, or I can play, my whatever. But then you find another one, and it's kind of the same role as you already had, or maybe a little bit worse, and it's like, okay, well, I guess this is just another 200,000 gold or something, right? So I think creating ways to make finding those rare items that are powerful, they need to make that more exciting. I don't know exactly the way to do that. I mean, if it were me making the change, I would just enable trading for those items, because that's what makes finding items exciting in D2. But if they don't want to do trading, then I think it would be beneficial if they created some other way to make them either useful or exciting. Maybe salvaging uniques would give you a special kind of material that then you could use at a new vendor to, I don't know, buy something else that gives you more power, or maybe selling uniques eventually could spawn like a world event, like in Diablo 2, how selling Stone of Jordans spawned Diablo clone. Maybe once the community at large sells a certain number of just general unique items, some big thing happens. Or maybe you could break down the uniques and create like a treasure goblin portal, like the puzzle ring in D3. I don't know. There's a lot that they could do with that, and I trust that their team could come up with better ideas than I can. But I think this is a problem where you find another copy of a legendary aspect that's not quite as good as the one you already have, and so you just trash it. And so later in the game, it becomes 99.99% you trash everything versus that tiny percentage chance that you drop something that's actually useful. and then you go try to re-roll it and you spend 40 million gold, and then it's not worth re-rolling anymore, so you trash that too. Now this last one, making upgrades feel more significant. This one can get a little bit messy, but I think in that later stage of the game, I think that upgrades need to feel more significant. And I'm not sure how to do this in a good way. Maybe that's just part of creating more tiers of rarity of uniques and things. But in the late game right now, upgrades are like I said before, plus 1% to a stat you already had, or something like that. But my idea is maybe add another breakpoint for item power. So right now there's breakpoints. I think there's like 4 or 5 of them where, once your item reaches item power, X, then the range of the stats that it has is bigger, or it can roll higher percentages. And I think the highest one right now is like 725. But if they added another one, maybe like 775 and then like 815, it could make, a lot of items feel better than their counterparts at lower item power. And then they could also combine that with something like make caps, or like shift the range of item power that you can drop at certain levels. Like maybe you hit level 70 and now you can drop up to item power 790. And then at level 80, you can drop up to 800, and then 90, and so forth, or something like that. But like increasing it so that the more you play the game and the further you get, the better your items will be. And then they'll hit those higher breakpoints, and then they can be even stronger. Something like that. I'm not sure what the best solution is to this. But I think that they should do something about it, because right now it doesn't feel good. So, in summary, key takeaways. Diablo 4 is great. It's a lot of fun, and it has a lot of room to grow. There's some low-hanging fruit that I think will make itemization feel a lot better, and will make progression feel a lot better. There's also some things that I think could use improvement, but maybe hard to resolve. Maybe this is fruit near the very top of the tree, and it will require some climbing and reaching and some pain, but I think it's worth the effort to try and fix those issues of not feeling like, things are really worth getting. Also, add Stone and Jordan to the game. It's awesome. It's iconic. I love that item. I miss it. So that's it. Those are my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts, or don't. Like the video and subscribe, or don't. It's fine. I have a day job. But yeah, I appreciate you.